Hi, folks. How's everything going? This is Dave with the Bit Journal broadcast, and today I just wanted to do a pickups video to talk about my little adventures during the summer. So sit back, relax, and please enjoy this video. So, been very busy this summer. I've been doing a lot of work, teaching my students like I usually do, and in between teaching my students, usually on the weekends, I head out and I go game hunting sometimes. So I haven't had much time to actually play some games, but I've had time to actually build my collection up. And we have some new content that's going to be coming up very, very soon. Going to start making videos again. So I just wanted to say hello to everybody and let you know that we got some new content coming. So let's go over some of the pickups. So you've probably seen one of my last videos I worked on was for Fire Emblem, the original Fire Emblem on the Famicom right over here. While I was on a little hunt in New York City over at J&O Game Trading, I happened to find the original Fire Emblem right over here. And I also found Fire Emblem Gaiden. Many of you may know this as Shadows of Valentia on the Nintendo 3DS. So, I've been having a blast exploring the world of Famicom gaming. It's actually been my first. These were the first two Famicom games I've ever owned right over here, and I'm just very, very happy and fortunate that I was able to find these titles. In addition to finding these titles, I definitely needed some way of playing them. So, one thing I got was this bad boy right over here. If you are looking for an excellent Famicom converter, I highly, highly suggest you get one of these. The reason why this converter is so great is because basically what the converter does is, excuse me for 1 second. There we go. Looks like I got a little plastic wrap on there. The converter puts it into the shape of an NES cartridge right over here. And what's great about that is it holds the cartridge in a lot more securely. Here's another Famicom cart that I happened to find out in the wild. It was over at Platinum Star Games over in Hal. And I found a copy of F1 Race. Now, for those of you who do not know what F1 Race is, there was an F1 Race game that was released on the Game Boy going back around 89, 90, 91-ish, somewhere around there. I remembered that game, and I didn't know that there was an earlier version of this. In fact, this version right over here was released in 1984. I was only 4 years old at the time when this thing was released, and it was great to find this out in the wild. But to show you the Famicom adapter, again, getting back to this, if you look at the back of this adapter right over here, you'll notice that there's some guardrails on the side over here. And of course, there's the cartridge adapter itself. And what those guardrails basically do is they allow me to take this cartridge right over here and pop it in, and it holds it in securely. There are other Famicom cartridge adapters out there, but I found this one to be the most sturdy out of all of them. Some adapters, if you just do something as simple as walking in a room, those adapters will shake and then will freeze up your game, and sometimes that erases your game save, and quite frankly, that is not cool at all. So to let you know, this specific Famicom adapter is from the company My Arcade. If you've ever seen any other My Arcade products, if they sound familiar, it's because they've also made these miniature arcade machines that you usually find in Walmart and Best Buy and GameStop and various other places as well. But yeah, I'm telling you, I've been through a couple of different Famicom cartridge converters, and for the NES, this is the way to go. I will admit though, full disclosure on this, one problem with this product is that it will not fit Shonen Jump cartridges in here, from the company that made like Dragon Ball and stuff along those lines. So you may need to get a more typical cartridge converter if you plan on playing those types of games. But any other type of Famicom game, for the most part, this adapter fits well, so I highly, highly suggest it if you're looking for a good adapter. You don't feel like spending a lot of money on on just importing a Famicom for that matter, or you just need a great adapter to fit into your system. This will work with both the front loaders and the top loading systems. I've been using it in my original front loading NES, and I also use it with the Hyperkin Retron HD as well, and it works quite well in that. So that's another thing that I picked up. Definitely wanted to talk a little more about this. And speaking of Famicom cartridges and moving forward, this is one major cartridge that's kind of been on my bucket list for a while. And this game, right over here, as you can see, check this out. It's got lenticular artwork. Okay, you probably... Oh, there we go. You can see it changing in the camera light right over there. Yep. And this game is called Getsu Fuuma Den. Something very interesting about this title, and I can't wait to do a video on this in the future. Getsu Fuuma Den, one, it runs off the Castlevania engine, basically, but instead of wielding a whip like you do in Castlevania, you're a samurai wielding a katana. But what's even more interesting about this game is, if you play it, you could hear ghosts of Konami's past actually inside of this game. If you listen to some of the sounds, you can actually hear Leonardo's sword swipe from the first Ninja Turtles game on the NES before the arcade version came out. You could also feel the slightly floaty jumping physics that they modified for Ninja Turtles as well. And it has third-person dungeon levels in it that's quite similar to the Goonies 2, actually. I found that to be very interesting. So yeah, this is Getsu Fuuma Den, and one day I'm definitely going to show this to you guys. Definitely a favorite acquisition of mine. One of the better games on the Famicom, and I can't wait to show that off to you sometime this fall. So, there were 3 great video game shops that I've been checking out in New Jersey. There's Digital Press in Clifton. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that one. There's Digital Press in Springfield. They opened up a second store, which is a little bit closer to home, so that rocks as well. And down the shore, there's also another place called Kill Screen Games, and I got a numerous amount of classics from these stores that I definitely want to show to you. One of those classics, I was searching through a pile of Super Nintendo cartridges over at Digital Press in Clifton, and I managed to find this bad boy hanging out in there. Now, what you're looking at is a copy of Dragon Quest III, also known as Dragon Warrior 3 in the United States. For those of you who are not familiar with the Dragon Quest series, although most people are playing Smash right now, so I wouldn't be quite surprised if you're not familiar with it by now. But as you can see, though, this artwork may look familiar to you. If you're thinking Dragon Ball Z, it's because, yes, with the Dragon Quest games, famed Dragon Ball Z artist Akira Toriyama did work on this game, and that's why you're looking at this right now. But it was nice to find this out in the wild boxed. I didn't expect to find this in a store that mainly deals with American old school style cartridges, but finding this out in the wild was definitely a nice surprise. Got it at a really affordable price too. I think I paid like maybe $11.99 for the cart. Beautiful find. So whoever traded that over to Digital Press in Clifton and to Digital Press in Clifton themselves, a big shout out for that. It was awesome finding that card over there. So let's get to some Nintendo carts that I found out in the wild over at Kill Screen Games in Asbury Park. Found this little awesome game right over here, classic from when I was growing up. A lot of these are going to be classics from when I was growing up, and some of them I may have played with my friends or rented back in the day. This is RC Pro-Am. For those of you who have never played RC Pro-Am, the best way to describe this game was the Mario Kart of its time, before Mario Kart even existed. It ran from a top-down three-quarter perspective, but you basically ran around a track with a radio-controlled car, collecting power-ups and basically firing missiles at other cars and trying to keep them out of the race so you could quickly rush over to the finish line. Excellent game. Definitely enjoyed this back in the day, and I've been enjoying this now as well. My only beef with this, I really, really wish that they made this multiplayer, because this game screams multiplayer. I would love to see another RC Pro-Am. Seeing that Rare worked on this, I don't know if we'll ever see one on the Switch, maybe. It would be pretty awesome if Nintendo worked out the relationship with Microsoft and quite possibly got this game over here. I know a lot of other people were thinking of many other Rare titles that they would like to see on the Switch. This is definitely one I would like to see on the Switch, and maybe see a new game in this series also. With things like Mario Kart and even Rocket League, for that matter, I believe that this game would have a very big impact in this day and age, and the kids would love it. So, yeah, RC Pro-Am, awesome title, definitely a great pickup. So, let's see what else we have over here for today. So, next up, we have one of the most difficult games in the NES library, Spelunker. I've got a love-hate relationship with this game. I wasn't introduced to this game through the NES. In fact, I was introduced to this game through the PlayStation 3. On the PlayStation Store, they have a game called Spelunker HD. In Japan, it's also known as Spelunker Black. And the Spelunker has got to be the weakest video game character in existence. If you just fall a few pixels, you die in this game. And I'm even talking about a few pixels before you even hit the ground, because it represents your cave explorer, basically. And it represents you spraining your ankle and not being able to get out of the cave and basically just dying. There's a million different ways to lose in this game, but that's some of the charm of this game, actually. Just the challenge of it, being able to figure out how to get through the levels. And I found this to be a frustratingly enjoyable experience, and I love to show this game off to other people. I'll definitely do a video for it one day. So yeah, look out for that one. We're gonna have a lot of fun with this once I have the opportunity to capture some footage and record. Then right here, I had to complete my trilogy. I already own Ninja Gaiden 2 and 3, but for some reason I did not have Ninja Gaiden 1 on the NES, so definitely had to pick this up and complete the trilogy. All of the Ninja Gaiden games on the NES have a certain level of difficulty to them, but they are awesome to play. They're a ton of fun. I love Shinobi on the Genesis, and I love Ninja Gaiden equally so for the same reasons that I like the Shinobi series. It's just fast-paced, fun, lots of acrobatics, lots of different ways of attacking your enemies. Overall, just a really, really fun ninja game that I suggest to anyone who's looking for a great ninja-style game, especially on the NES. This may be just one of the best on the system, but we'll see about that, because there's other ninja games out there that I may cover in the future. We'll just leave that as a hint for now. But yeah, definitely it was great finding this piece. Over here is another bucket list title that I've been wanting to play for quite some time, and this is the Conquest of Crystal Palace, okay? Now this game may look a little weird on the cover, but it's actually a really cool anime-style side-scroller. Graphics, I would say, are somewhat comparable maybe to Megaman, but it's more of a fantasy-based game that's, I don't necessarily say China or Japan specifically, but it kind of gives that vibe off with the way the mountains are in the background and the way the characters have been drawn, the type of sword that the main character wields. It's a lot of fun. It has its own quirks that make it somewhat difficult, but it's a blast to play. I really enjoy it a lot, and yeah, it's definitely going to be cool doing a video on this thing one day as well. And then, of course, we have the classic Contra. on the NES. I've owned a lot of games on the NES, but there's also a lot that I haven't owned as well, and Contra happens to be one of them. I've played it a million times. I've downloaded ROMs for this in terms of like the Nintendo eShop and stuff along those lines. But yeah, I've never had the opportunity to actually own this cartridge, so I was just glad to pick this up. And it's great to have around, especially if you have friends coming over and you just want to get a nice co-op round of Contra going. Yeah, this is a staple for any NES collection. So if you've got an NES, definitely grab a copy of this. And then here is another classic. Inspired by Bruce Lee's Game of Death, we've got Kung Fu. Kung Fu, as many of you may or may not know, is a classic beat 'em up that was on the NES, but it wasn't a beat 'em up in the sense of like Double Dragon, where you could go up into the background and out of the background. It was completely side-scrolling, and you basically had to beat up any enemies that was in your path. Great game overall, a lot of fun to play. I definitely enjoy it, and it's a fun game if you just want to relax and play something. It's got a little bit of its own challenge, but it's not as difficult as a lot of other titles in the NES library. So, yeah, Kung Fu, definitely an awesome title. On the other hand of the challenge spectrum, another great title that I found out in the wild is Gradius. Now, Gradius is an incredible side-scrolling shooter. I would say that Gradius, along with Galaga, is probably two of the most copied games in the genre, and there's a good reason for this. This game is very fast-paced. You can collect many power-ups, but the way you collected power-ups was you grab these little dots, and depending on how many of those dots you collected, it would move this little meter underneath the screen, and if you had enough dots, you could select whatever was on that meter. So sometimes you would just get a simple speed up. Other times you would get lasers, you would get missiles, you would get options that would actually follow your ship around. And, this is definitely great for any shoot 'em up fan. It's a classic Konami game, and, definitely something I've enjoyed. I've played quite a few Gradius games over the years, and it's nice to have the original in my collection. Now, this next game I picked up is actually a classic that I used to own on the NES when I was younger, and this is something I really needed back in my collection. And that, my friends, is Jackal. If you have never played Jackal before, this is a top-down game where you and a friend get to ride around in jeeps, and I want you to think of Choplifter in a sense. It's from a top-down view, though. It's not from a side-scrolling view like Choplifter is, but you go into these enemy encampments, you rescue hostages, and then after you rescue the hostages, you got to take them to the drop-off point where the helicopter is and drop them off over there, all while trying to protect your jeeps and take out all the enemies and the bosses. This is a great arcade-style co-op shoot-'em-up type game, and it's unique because I don't know of too many games where you get to ride around in jeeps and do this type of a thing. So if you've got an NES, you're looking for a great co-op game, once again, Konami, they were great back in the day, and Jackal is a perfect example of one of those great games. Another little interesting fact about Jackal, if you look at the graphics, you'll notice that it looks like some of the assets were ripped from Contra, especially those tank-style guns that you see in the game. They're like stationary tank-style guns. Looks like you see those in Jackal, and they've used them in both a side-scrolling and a top-down manner. So, interesting to see that little piece of history right over there. All right. Getting over to another classic that I had to pick up. I used to rent this a lot when I was a kid, and, growing up in grade school, a lot of kids would play this. This is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game. This is an excellent excellent representation of the game. Of course, it's not going to look as good as the arcade itself because, after all, it's the NES, and this was released out in the early 90s. But the game plays really, really well, and the controls are phenomenal for an NES game. It's another great co-op style beat 'em up. So, if you're looking for a good co-op style beat 'em up on the NES, this is definitely one of many that are on that system, and I highly suggest this one. Come on, it's Ninja Turtles, one of the greatest cartoon licenses out there, and they made an excellent game out of it. Here's another classic I used to rent back in the day a lot. This is Hudson's Adventure Island. This is where you get to play as Master Higgins, a dude who apparently rides around on a skateboard and has a bunch of hatchets that he could throw, a bunch of stone hatchets that he could throw at his enemies. This game has really catchy music. It's an old platformer. You could die from a lot of things in this, and it's a difficult game to say the least, but it's a heck of a lot of fun, and it's something I would definitely suggest if you're looking for a great platformer, such as things that are in the same vein as like Bonk's Adventure, Super Mario Brothers, of course, the Wonder Boy series, etc. Yeah, give Adventure Island a shot if you're into that kind of stuff. And then another classic. So, I have this on the Game Boy Advance, but I do not have the NES version. I do, however, have the third iteration of this game, but I needed the first. So, we've got the original Castlevania, and I love the Castlevania games. They're all classic. I enjoy the heck out of them. And, who doesn't like going to fight Dracula in a game? It's just fun. At the end of the day, it's just fun. This is definitely one of my favorite games on the system. All the Castlevania games on the system, even Simon's Quest, which was like super difficult. I've played that in other iterations. I've never owned it on the NES directly, but I used to rent it a lot back in the day too. And I know a lot of people don't like that game, but I actually enjoy it a lot, and would argue that it was the beginning of the whole Metroidvania craze before Symphony of the Night, because of what you had to do. It's just that the objectives weren't so clear in that game for obvious reasons. You'd have to read Nintendo Power to see what's going on with that. But yeah, Castlevania, awesome title, definitely a staple you should have in your collection. And along with Castlevania, another staple is this right over here, the original Metroid. I needed a copy of this. Believe it or not, when I was younger, I have not played the original Metroid. I got into Metroid on the Game Boy Advance when I first started playing Metroid Fusion, and ever since I've been going back and trying out the series, and I've played it in different iterations. But it's nice to have the original cartridge and play it. From a collector's standpoint, you can't beat the original. So glad to have this in my collection. So, another game I picked up recently is another classic right here, Mega Man 3. I remember a while ago, on the Nintendo Wii, a friend of mine actually gifted me Mega Man 3 one day, because that's one cool feature that the Wii had on the Wii Shop channel. You could gift people games, and he gifted Mega Man 3 to me, and so I played it digitally, and now I actually have a cartridge for this. So while I've owned the Mega Man games on collections and stuff like that, when I was a kid, I did not have access to Mega Man 3 or a lot of the other Mega Man games. Simple, because I was a young kid, I didn't have much money, and we did not rent all the time. There were some games that I rented, but we did not rent all the time. So games that were big when I was younger, obviously, was like Super Mario Brothers and Zelda and stuff like that. But it's nice to have a Mega Man cartridge in my collection right now, and I figured since the first original Mega Man game I've ever owned was Mega Man 3 on the Wii, I figured I'd get the original cartridge. Big shout out to my friend Mark. Thanks for getting me that a long time ago, man. Awesome, dude. Thank you very much, and I'm glad to finally own the cartridge now for the ROM that you hooked me up with on the Wii Shop channel, so thank you very much for that. Ah, and here's another classic I used to play with some of my old friends back in the day. This is a cartridge that I needed to own. The controls have always been a little wonky and a little weird to me, but for some reason I love playing it. And that is Double Dragon 2, The Revenge. If you've played many beat-em-ups on the system, you've played the original Double Dragon, perhaps you've played River City Ransom, or maybe Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, like I talked about earlier. Double Dragon 2 is in that vein, but it's got a rather unique control scheme where you have to press the buttons in a direction. I'm talking about the A and the B button. You got to press them in the direction you're facing, and depending on what direction you're facing, those buttons do different things, which makes this game kind of unique and a little weird at the same time. But the game is a lot of fun to play, both single player and multiplayer. If you're looking for another fun arcade beat 'em up, definitely check out Double Dragon 2. Awesome title to have in your set. Earlier I showed you Gradius, and then while doing a little more searching, I found Life Force as well. This I found over at the Digital Press Springfield location, along with a lot of other games that I'm showing you right over here. And, Life Force is a really, really fun game to check out. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe this is known as Salamander in Japan. That's why you see a picture, like some type of reptile on the outside, or a snake or something like that. Life Force is known to be brutally difficult. What's cool about it is this has 2-player simultaneous co-op, whereas, if I'm not mistaken, the original Gradius did not have that on the NES, but Life Force does. Life Force also does side-scrolling and top-down levels in addition to that, which makes this game rather unique. But I used to play this with my friends a lot, and even it still kicks my butt to this day, but I enjoy playing it, and it was yet another one that I had to have in my collection. So, yeah, Life Force. Another Konami classic. I don't know what it is with me and Konami games from back in the day, but they just really, really knocked it out of the park for NES back then. So did Capcom, for that matter, too. But, yeah, definitely something needed to have in there. Then we have the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, this is the first game, the side-scrolling one, where you could play as all 4 of the different turtles. It was notoriously difficult for that level where you had to prevent the dam from blowing up by disarming the bombs that were under the water. It was a very very difficult game, but a lot of fun. This is another rental that I used to rent a lot, and a lot of my friends used to play this as well back in the day. So brings back a lot of memories. It's also great driving around in the turtle van and just blasting things up. So, yep, NES, Ninja Turtles, awesome game. Here we go. And here's a classic for a lot of you. So, in the U.S., a lot of us did not own an MSX computer system, even though it did actually exist in some way, shape, or form. Although we did not get Metal Gear, the MSX computer, was in the U.S. to a smaller extent, but it just wasn't very popular. It was very hard to find. But right over here, I've got the original Metal Gear for the NES. What was cool about this game, especially at the time, is that it really made you think outside the box. This was different from a lot of other titles that came out during this time. Your objective really wasn't to take out the enemies. It was to try to avoid them and get the missions accomplished. Of course, you'd eventually have to fight bosses and stuff like that. But ultimately, it was about staying alive. It may not be a survival horror game, but to a certain extent, even though this comes into the stealth genre, I'd also argue that this is one of the original survival games out there as well, because you had to be really careful about what you were doing, and you had to be really thrifty with the items that you found in the game. You could run out of bullets, you could run out of rations, you could run out of a lot of things in this game. So, yeah, Metal Gear is a great game to have in your collection if you want something a little bit different from the typical NES top-down adventure games. Definitely pick up Metal Gear on the NES. Here is another arcade classic that I remember, and that is Spy Hunter. I mean, Spy Hunter, what's cool about this, it was a game where you had a really cool spy type car that transformed into boats and motorcycles and a bunch of other things. And when you're driving around on the road, you have other cars with blades popping out of their wheels trying to pop your tires. Kind of like Knight Rider, it's got that tractor trailer that drives up on the side, and then you could get into the truck to replenish things, and you could get out of the truck when the truck launches you into the level that you're playing. Really difficult game though. If you're not used to playing this game will kick your butt. Just word of warning. But yeah, definitely a cool game. So yep, Spy Hunter, another awesome title. Now another thing, when I'm playing on Nintendo Switch, I really like looking through the games that they give us on the Nintendo app, the NES app that they have on there. And one game I was introduced to on the NES app was Star Soldier. I did not think I would like this game as much as I did. This is a beautiful top-down shooter. It's got all of that arcade excitement. It's really fast-paced. There's some decent parallax scrolling in this game. And I seen the cartridge out in the wild, so I figured I'd pick it up because I definitely enjoyed trying it out on the Switch, and it was definitely something I wanted to own in my collection. So Star Soldier, definitely had to pick this one up as well. Yeah, let's see. We also got that ends our NES section and our Famicom section. I also picked up some great Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and Switch games, as well as one Vita game over the course of the summer, which I'm about to show you in a little bit. So let's get started with the Super NES stuff first. So, just grabbed this this bad boy, yesterday actually over at Digital Press in Springfield. Super Metroid. What is there to say about Super Metroid? This is a beautiful game. A lot of people credit this as one of the games that was like the precursor to the Metroidvania genre for obvious reasons. It's also one of the greatest games on the Super Nintendo. I wanted it in my collection. I own it digitally, and I also have it on my SNES Classic, but I wanted an original copy for this, so I could play this in my Super Retron HD and in my SNES Model 2. So yeah, Super Metroid, definitely a classic, definitely something that I wanted in my collection physically. Now, the next game I'm going to show you, I already own on the Game Boy Advance, but I also wanted the original. This was more for nostalgic reasons, and that is Super Mario World on the SNES. I used to play this with friends a lot back in the day, and, it's Super Mario World. I mean, it's one of the greatest platformers ever made. I still like Super Mario 3 a little bit more than Super Mario World, but Super Mario World introduced a lot of the staple characters that we have in the Mario universe today. It's a very important game in the Mario franchise, and, yeah, definitely a game to have in your SNES collection. So, another game that I own in various formats, including digitally and on the PlayStation 1, is Final Fantasy VI. On the Super Nintendo, it was known as Final Fantasy III, and this was Hironobu Sakaguchi's last major role-playing game that he made with Squaresoft before he left the company, and there were so many groundbreaking things going on in this game, it's not even funny. I mean, even though a lot of people followed Terra in the game, the fact of the matter is there were so many characters in this game, it was kind of hard to tell who really was the main character. There's so many different side stories. One game that came out fairly recently is Octopath Traveler on the Switch, And that kind of brought me back to what Final Fantasy 6 slash Final Fantasy 3 was. And it was nice to get this on the Super Nintendo because although I like the PlayStation version, the Super Nintendo version doesn't have the same level of load times because it's not on a disc. And the game is just super fun to play, and it's a beautiful, wonderful piece of art. A lot of video games are pieces of art, but this is an incredible, incredible piece right here to have. So, Final Fantasy 3, totally epic. Definitely glad I picked that up. Another Super Nintendo game that I was happy to find out in the wild, another one that I found at Digital Press in Springfield, was a copy of Soul Blazer. Now, some of you may be wondering, what the heck is Soul Blazer? Some of you may remember a game on the Super Nintendo called Illusion of Gaia, and it kind of had like that Legend of Zelda feel to it. It was a top-down action RPG. One of the more popular games that never came to the United States that's also in this trilogy is, and by trilogy I mean spiritual trilogy, is Terranigma as well. Well, this right over here is one of the games in those trilogies as well. This is Soul Blazer, and before the summer, I was having a blast playing through this game. Now, I haven't completely beaten it yet, but I've gotten fairly far in this. This was one game that I gave a little bit more time to, and I can't wait to do a video on this one of these days. It's a really, really fun title, and I think you guys will enjoy seeing footage for it. So, yeah, be on the lookout for that. Then, of course, another classic. So, one thing you may or may not know about me is that, to a certain extent, I like classic racing games. I don't buy racing games all the time, but I really like to have them in my collection, and I like to play them every so often. A long time ago, I used to run my own video game tournaments, and one game I ran in a tournament a long time ago was the original Top Gear on the SNES. So, I had to own a copy of this for myself because I love the original Top Gear. I love its soundtrack, and what also made me want to pick this cartridge up was the fact that the same musician who did the music for Horizon Chase Turbo actually did music in Top Gear as well, and you could hear the remix track in Horizon Chase Turbo, so it was nice to have a look at the original and see where the roots of that came from, so definitely had to have this in my collection. So believe it or not, folks... Oh, wait, I still had a few more Super Nintendo games. And these Super Nintendo games right here are a trio of games, actually. A trio of classics that I never owned back in the day, and now I finally get to own all three of them, and I'm very happy about this. I know some of my friends used to own this back in the day, but back then I didn't have a Super Nintendo. I had a Sega Genesis. I certainly do not hate the Super Nintendo. I actually love a lot of the games that are on that system. I just did not own one back in the day, so it's great to be able to go back and experience some of these for maybe the first, second time, etc. So, we have Super Star Wars, Super Empire Strikes Back, and a complete in-box copy of Super Star Wars Return of the Jedi. So it's nice to have all three of these in my collection, and it's a really nice bonus that I was able to find Return of the Jedi complete in box. They're difficult games, to be honest with you, from what I've played so far, but I really enjoy playing them. They take me back to that time period when digitized graphics were becoming a thing, you know, with like games like Mortal Kombat and Alien 3, etc., stuff along those lines. So it was great to be able to go back and play these old cartridges, and I definitely will be playing more of these as the years go on. So, yeah, that covers it for the SNES games that I picked up. Now let's go on to some of the Genesis stuff. So, to start off with, this is a game I've been wanting to own for a while. I know some people really really do not like this game, but I do enjoy it actually, and that's Chakan the Forever Man. When I played this game, the first thing I thought of was a Togi Myth of Demons on the Xbox. Um, the characters may be a little bit different, but it's the same basic concept. You basically fight death, you beat him in a duel, and now you've become death yourself, and you're trying to find peace, and you need to rid the world of evil before that can happen. And that's what's interesting about Chakan. So this was definitely a game that I wanted in my collection, and I'm glad to finally have it in my collection now. So we've got that. And wait till you guys see what I found out in the wild. I found this over at Digital Press in Springfield. Paid $20 for it. Did you believe that? $20. This is Dragon Ball Z Buretsuden. It is complete in box. And as you can see, this right here is a Mega Drive cartridge. It's the first Mega Drive cartridge I've ever owned. I've never owned the Mega Drive, but I've owned the Genesis back in the day. And now that I have a Mega Retron HD, I'm actually able to play this game. And it's also the first Dragon Ball game that I own in my collection, actually. And I gotta say, it's definitely a lot of fun, and it's interesting. After finding this in the wild, since I now have a Mega Drive game in my collection, I had to have another Mega Drive game in my collection. So there's another bucket list game that I've wanted for a very long time, but the American version is super expensive. And this is a later release on the Sega Genesis that was called Crusader of Senti. It's basically a Zelda-style game that was released by Atlas back in the day, of all companies, on the Sega Genesis. But getting that can run you close to $450, $500 today. Of course, those prices may change as this video gets older, but man, I'm telling you, that game is tough to find. So I got the Japanese version of it, and this is Rognoscenti right over here. And I don't know if you can look at the back of the box over here, you could see how it's like a top-down Zelda-style clone. And yeah, this was released by Atlas in the United States. You know, Atlas games, they do a very low print run, so it was great to just get a hold of this game and actually play it. I've been having a blast with it so far. I've played it in the past, even though I haven't actually owned the title. I have tried it out once or twice, and it's awesome to have a physical copy of this in my collection. So I'm glad to finally have a copy of Crusader of Senti, or in this case, Rognoscenti, as it's called in Japan. Now, one game I will definitely be doing a video on, and if you're on Facebook, you've probably seen me post some pictures for this, is Mazin Saga, Mutant Fighter. So, there is an anime in Japan, a really old robot anime called Mazinger Z. And in the 90s, they remade the storyline of Mazinger Z in a manga. Originally, the Mazinger did not have a sword in his hand. He had like a rocket fist that he would just fire at his enemies and punch them in the face. So it was pretty cool. But Mazin Saga Mutant Fighter, what I found interesting about this game when I was watching videos for this thing, is the fact that it is a mid to late level release beat 'em up that's on the Sega Genesis. So you start out, you're playing as the Mazinger Z, just walking around human size in that special armor that he's wearing. But then what happens is, as in traditional Mazinger Z type fashion, or even Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for that matter, what ends up happening is that armor can grow to like the size of buildings, basically. So you and the boss character, once you get to the end of each level, are basically fighting at it in Godzilla-style levels. This game is such a blast to play. It's extremely difficult, too, but I don't know. I have a lot of fun playing it. It's definitely a video that I can't wait to show you, because this is a super rare game you're looking at the moment. This is very, very hard to find, and I'm glad that I was able to get a complete copy of this. So Yeah, Mazin Saga. I can't wait to show this off to you guys. Then I also found a couple of Genesis games that I've played and owned in various ways. But this one was very, very interesting. And that is Kid Chameleon on the Genesis. Now, most of the people I speak to are in the United States. But since you're in the United States, you don't always get to see what Canadian releases look like. I thought when I looked at this that I was looking at something fake, but in fact I did some research on this, and I also spoke to the owner of Digital Press over in Springfield, and he explained to me that this is actually a Canadian cartridge. Let me open this box up and wait till you see what's inside. So, looks like a normal Sega Genesis box, basically. You know, let's get the side art right over there. And there you get the screenshots and all that. Okay, nothing too weird. But then you look at this. So, this is supposed to be a Sega Genesis cartridge, right? But look at that. One, the cartridge says Mega Drive on it, even though it's shaped like a Sega Genesis cartridge. And look at that instruction manual. That is very, very different from what a United States Sega Genesis manual looks like. To make things more interesting, when you look at a typical Sega Genesis cartridge, as you can see, it's the same shape as the supposed Mega Drive cartridge that I'm looking at over here. So the question is this an imposter? Look at the shape of that. It's still the same shape. But now, let's look at a Mega Drive cartridge from Japan. So let's look at our copy of Dragon Ball Z right over here. Have a look at that. Notice, their Mega Drive cartridges have these ribs along the side. They have these little notches, and they got more ribs on the side as well. And also, just to show you, it's not just this cartridge. It's also on another cartridge that I own as well. I'll show you Rognoscenti. You look at Rognoscenti, you have the same exact thing. Same ribs. See? Right along here with the notch. Right over here as well. As you can see too, you look at the back. It says it's made in Japan. Well, actually, it may be a little hard for you guys to see. So let me see if we can... I guess it's not going to focus it in as well. But yeah, it says this one is made in Japan over here and has all of the copyrights on it. But yeah, this is indeed a classic cartridge made in 1994. That's what Mega Drive cartridges normally look like. But in Canada, I don't really know the reason why. Maybe it's the crosswinds of the United States and the European languages that are spoke there. But what's interesting about this one is that once again, it's got that Mega Drive logo on there, but it also has an odd-looking instruction manual. Now, the gentleman over at Digital Press in Springfield pointed out to me that there are several different languages in this manual, and that's why this manual, if you look, that's a really thick instruction manual for a typical Sega Genesis game. Let me show you what an American Sega Genesis manual looks like, just so you guys kind of get the idea. First, I gotta be careful with this manual. I don't want to rip this up or bend it or anything along those lines. So just, So if you look at another Sega Genesis manual, let's look at Mazin Saga again. See the difference? Look at how thin that manual is. And of course, they went with the vertical format. Whereas for the PAL regions, they went with the horizontal format. But what's even more interesting is that Canadian game that I showed you, this Canadian Kid Chameleon, is actually an NTSC cartridge. and I could put this in. I could put this into a Mega Retron HD. It'll work perfectly. I still need to test it out in my actual Sega Genesis Model 1. But it will be interesting to see if this cartridge actually works inside there. That'd be pretty awesome to see if that works. I looked at this cartridge. I opened it up. I certainly know it's not a repro. And I found out that there were actually two different versions of Kid Chameleon that were released in Canada as well. So there are there's the original and then there's the variants. And my understanding is that this is the variant cartridge right over here. So I found this to be a curiosity of some sorts. I needed Kid Chameleon in my collection, and I'm glad I got this version of it because it's a conversation piece. It's interesting. It's a part of history. This is the first Canadian game I've ever owned. If there's anybody from Canada who could correct me on this title, please do so. But I found this to be a very, very interesting find. It's different. It's a really, in general, Kid Chameleon in itself is a really cool game, but to find a version like this, man, it's just awesome. And then to end off on the Sega Genesis games for the pickups of this summer, I found a copy of Alien 3 on a Genesis. This is a game I used to rent back in the day, and they also used to have in the Genesis demo kiosk over at an old rental store in North Arlington called Video World and Compact Disc Den. That store was awesome back in the day. It was back in the 90s, that was one of the most hardcore Genesis stores I have ever seen. I mean, we're talking about a store that had like 50 copies of Madden Tournament Edition. I know that may not seem like a big deal to most of you guys, but finding a limited edition sports game back in the 90s was a very, very rare occurrence indeed. You didn't find too many limited edition games, period, so that was very different. Also, when I see a lot of Hidden Gems videos today, I realized that that video store I used to go to had a lot of the Hidden Gems that they talk about over there. I mean, I remember seeing Lunar over there. Games like Young Galahad, made by Electronic Arts. Believe it or not, Electronic Arts had some pretty awesome fantasy side-scrollers on the Genesis back in the day, in addition to all those crazy sports games that they had on there. But I remember seeing a lot of those Hidden Gems in that store, and, this is how I got introduced to Alien 3. I got introduced to Alien 3 through their demo kiosk, and then I used to rent this. This is a difficult game. If you don't know where the aliens are, even though there's a tracker, they move so fast that you will die. There's also you also have a limited amount of time to rescue all the people in the game. So it's definitely tough. It's something I enjoy personally, although I could see others getting frustrated with it. But it was something I had to have in my collection. It was a game I enjoyed back in the day, and I'm glad to finally have a copy of this. Well, before I head over to the Switch, I just want to talk about the one PlayStation Vita game I picked up this summer. I know one of my friends are going to be really excited when they see that I got a hold of this. But I finally got a copy of Trails of Cold Steel on the PlayStation Vita. Got it at a decent price, too. Paid, like, maybe $17.99 for this thing. It's definitely an awesome title. Awesome little turn-based RPG. It's got a unique thing going for it in terms of its battle system, and it also plays on the PlayStation TV. It's actually my preferred way to play this game. So if you guys are looking for a good Vita game out there, definitely give this game a shot. It's a great RPG. I think people are starting to kind of notice it now, but it's still somewhat underappreciated. So definitely check out the Trails of Cold Steel series. There's 3 of these games, by the way. They just released the 3rd one on the PlayStation 4 not too long ago, so definitely check this series out. And now we move on to the Nintendo Switch. Alright, so a lot of the things I got on the Switch mainly are physical versions of games that I already have digitally. If some of these look familiar, it's because I've already done video reviews for these things. Games like, for example, my copy of Bloodstained Curse of the Moon Classic Edition came in. I bought this special case. It does not come with this case, but there's only 3,000 of these in existence. I own the game digitally, so I really did not want to open up this specific copy. No, I don't plan on selling it, but I just love the way it looks in this case. And I play it on my Switch as it is right now. But it's really cool to just see that old school style Konami artwork on this thing. And, just knowing that I've got a physical copy of this, which is basically done in the old school Castlevania 3 style. This is a game I really, really, really like a lot. And I'm very lucky and happy that I was able to get a copy of this from Limited Run. So, yeah, big shout out to them for making an awesome collector's edition. And this is definitely a great pickup that I enjoy playing a digital version, but I'm glad to have this in my collection. Let's see. Speaking of which, of other digital games that I got a hold of, PlayAsia shipped me a copy of Odalis and Onikin collection. So there's a lot of things that come in this box, but I'm just going to show you the box itself. So you may have seen my review for Onikin and Odalis, or Odalis and Onikin collection right over here. And this is a PlayAsia exclusive. I think they only made 5,000 copies of these. Once again, I also own this game digitally, so I don't plan on opening this up right now, but I like to have it physical in case the digital goes down for whatever reason. I have it backed up physically, and I can just open it up and play it whenever I want. So, yeah, great to have this collection. Nice thick box. I know there's like a soundtrack in here, and there's a fully illustrated instruction manual, numbered certificate, and there's a game card in here as well. A lot of cool things, but this is a fun little collection to have, and I'm glad to finally see that this arrived and that this is in my collection. Definitely awesome indie titles to play. They have that old school. They got like a Castlevania vibe, but they also kind of feel like Kadesh. If you've ever played that game, it's a classic fantasy side-scrolling hack and slash platformer style game that came out in the arcades and also on the Genesis and a few other systems as well. I think it was even on TurboGrafx 16 and maybe even the Sega Master System. But yeah, it definitely had that cool feel to it. So it's great to have Odalis in my collection. Let's see what else. Another game that I own digitally that I also wanted physical, you've probably seen my review for this if you're watching this video, is Dragon Worked for Death. And just like Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, this was created by Inti Creates, which is an excellent indie company that has also worked on the Mega Man Zero series in the past, along with Mighty Number 9 and Bloodstained, of course, Azure Striker Gunvolt, Galgun. There's a bunch of different games they made, but this one is for the collection as well because I own this digitally. But yeah, this is a fun series to check out. So if you haven't checked this out already, definitely give it a shot. It's on the Nintendo eShop right now. Some other games I picked up: Dragon's Dogma, Dark Arisen. I mean, this is a great title right over here. I need more time to play it, of course, but I think this is going for like a budget price of like $30 if I'm not mistaken, and the entire game is on the card. Capcom, let me just mention this. You need to do this more often. People who collect physically do not like buying a game in a case and then getting a digital code to get like half the game, or to get even like a demo on a cartridge and then having to download the rest of it. We want the full game on the cartridge. So guys, please stop cheaping out on the Nintendo game cards that you're purchasing. If you know it's going to need like 16 gigabytes, get a 16 gigabyte card. Don't go for the 12, man. we want to see stuff like that as fans, and you know, this was definitely a good move. But I mean, come on, you couldn't fit all the Mega Man games onto one cartridge. You couldn't fit all the Mega Man X games onto one cartridge. You know you could have done that for us. Do like you did with Dragon's Dogma and get that done with future releases, please. It would be highly appreciated, guys. Let's see, what else did we get over here? Oh, yeah. Here's a game I've been waiting for a very, very, very long time. And while there are some bugs in this game, it really has not disappointed me because I just happen to be a fan of the gameplay. And that is Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. This was made by Koji Igarashi. As you know, he is the guy who created Castlevania Symphony of the Night and a lot of other Castlevanias afterwards. A lot of the side-scrolling Metroidvania type games. And this is him basically building Castlevania without the Castlevania name. And this game is a ton of fun to play. If you haven't played Bloodstains yet and you're looking for a new Castlevania to play, definitely grab a hold of this. Well, I have played some of this already. I have a tradition where I like to play Castlevania and Castlevania-style games around Halloween, so I can guarantee you I'm definitely going to be playing Bloodstained around that time. So, yeah, definitely. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night and also Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, both awesome games, so definitely check those out. Oh, and here's yet another title I've been waiting for a while that finally came out. And I need more time to put into this, to be quite frank. And that is Fire Emblem Three Houses. Now, I'll be honest with you. Fire Emblem Three Houses, you play as a teacher that's instructing your students in the art of war, essentially speaking. And you got to pick one of the three houses, and you become their instructor, and you try to help them out. You could recruit people from other houses as well. It's a really interesting game. There's a lot of stuff going on that make it different from other Fire Emblem games, and that's awesome. But as a teacher myself, I kind of feel like I'm going to work when I'm playing this game, and that makes things very, very interesting to say the least. But I still love the strategy aspects of it. It's all the micromanagement in the background that can slow it down a bit. But I definitely want to play more of this title, and one of these days I'll give you a video and let you know my thoughts on this. So, yeah, you know, Fire Emblem Three Houses is an awesome game. Go check it out. Then over here, here's another game that I own digitally that I was not... that I basically wanted to have physically in my collection. And this is the special edition of Horizon Chase Turbo. Now, earlier, I showed you a cartridge. Actually, let's get that up here again. For Top Gear. The musician who worked on the music in Horizon Chase Turbo also worked on the music in Top Gear. It's a really awesome alternate cover on the outside of this. Also, I love the way it looks. I'm sure you've seen my video for Top Gear previously, but I think one of the things I love about this game the most is I love the graphics. I love the fact that it just kind of gives off that old school feel. It's got a retro look to it, but it also feels modern at the same time. And that's what makes this such a great indie game and such a classic. It's also four-player couch play, you know, split screen on a single Switch, which is awesome. So if you love racing games and you want to play one on the Switch, definitely get this. Gets my highest recommendation, to be honest with you. Alright. And let's see. And finally, folks, the one Switch game I've been waiting for a while finally came out in the United States. And that, my friends, is Collection of Mana. Now, why is this such an important title to me? I own every release of the Mana series, with the exception, obviously, of the cell phone games that came out in Japan. But in terms of, like, physical games, I own them all. I'm talking about Final Fantasy Adventure, Secret of Mana, Seiken Densetsu 3 on the Super Famicom, Legend of Mana, Children of Mana, Seiken Densetsu 4, or Secret Seiken Densetsu 4 on the PlayStation 2. And what else do we have on there as well? Children of Mana, like I said, once again on the Nintendo DS. And let's see, Children of Mana, and then there was that Tactics game that came out on the Nintendo DS a while back as well. I believe that was Heroes of Mana that I own on that. And then of course I got the remake of Final Fantasy Adventure, which is known as Sword of Mana on the Game Boy Advance, and then I made yet a second remake of that game called Adventures of Mana, which was released on cell phones and was also released on the PSP, which is the system of choice for me for playing that game. And I've got the remake of Secret of Mana as well on the PlayStation 4. Currently, I'm waiting for the remake of Trials of Mana. But what's interesting is Collection of Mana has Trials of Mana in English in an official translation for the very, very, very first time in the United States. Sure, there's been a ton of ROM hacks on this thing, and they've done English translation on the ROM hacks, but they never, ever had an official translation for this game. Since I own a Japanese cartridge, I've been waiting a long, long time to play an official translation for Trials of Mana, also known as Seiken Densetsu 3, in English. And that's the reason why I'm so happy that this has been released. It's got Final Fantasy Adventure, it has Secret of Mana, and it has Trials of Mana, all on one cartridge. Now, sure, I could have gotten this digitally, but being the big Mana fan that I am, and knowing that I have all the physical stuff, I had to get this physically. It's an absolute must in my collection, so I'm definitely glad to get this. If you love action RPGs, guys, check this out on the Switch. You can't go wrong. Two of these games, Secret of Mana and Trials of Mana, are actually 3-player games also, so it's something you could play with your friends as well, or your brothers and your sisters, or your family. So go ahead and check this out. So, those have been my pickups for the summer, and expect more videos in the future, guys. I'm looking forward to creating more content. I've had a very, very busy, eventful summer this year. It was great, once again, teaching the young minds how to develop games, how to create content, create videos, and a bunch of other things that I teach with my job. But now it's great to be able to come back to YouTube and cover some more games and basically show off what's in the collection and give my thoughts on this stuff. So thanks again for watching. If you got this far, awesome. Have a great one. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video, and as always, peace. Have a great one, folks. Take care now. Bye bye.